What is up, Chalk Talk Nation? Welcome back to episode 6 with Noah Gayhart. I'm Rob Rundle. Welcome. We know that MLB is off to a shaky start, as well as all sports across the world, because of the coronavirus outbreak. It's caused a lot of panic, but please don't panic. We know that there aren't any live sports, but we do have live podcasts still every Sunday evening at 6 p.m. Whether the season's delayed or not, we're still going to be live. Maybe we'll tell stories, our favorite stories. We'll give you maybe our favorite players that we wish we could have seen, just different baseball scenarios, different type of stuff like that. We got a lot to cover. As we know, the AL West is going to be interesting. But first, going back to the coronavirus, Noah, we had news today that our first baseball player had the coronavirus. It was a Yankees minor league player, but the good news, I guess, is that he was not in the major league side of spring training. He was just in the minors in Tampa. Your thoughts about this?
Obviously, anytime someone comes down with it, that's definitely not what you want to have. It'll be interesting as more news kind of comes out about it as to, like, whether he had already reported to minor league spring training. How many people was he around? Because obviously we've had a lot of stuff going down where they've closed camps or said you guys are free to go home and stuff like that. And so it'll be interesting to see, like, in the coming days, see like how many people that they test, or like it'll be interesting to see even if like who it comes out being. You almost wonder if it's like one of the Yankees' top guys like Devi Garcia, or if it's just some no-name dude that's like 28 that's just kind of hanging on in Double A or something. But either way, you don't want to see anybody come down with it. But so, I don't know.
No, and I kind of think it is a big prospect in a way, because they didn't release the name. Because with the NBA, with Rudy Gobert, they had another player for the Pistons today that tested positive.
Yeah, Christian Wood.
Christian Wood, and then obviously Donovan Mitchell. I kind of think that this is maybe a high caliber prospect for the Yankees, because that could be that could affect their organization in a way. Granted, all players do, but there's a little bit more significance when you're that first player that gets tested positive. So it's really interesting, man. And with the coronavirus, I know we're going to get into this in the next coming minutes, but you have to think about the MLB, right? Like, how are they going to go about this? Because right now, Major League Baseball has decided to delay opening day for at least 2 weeks. We do know that. Do I think it's going to resume in 2 weeks? No. It's hard to tell, because there's a 14-day incubation period just alone with people who do have the coronavirus, and we still have yet to control it. For those who are in Kentucky watching this, Governor Beshear has done a tremendous job. He has, I forget the doctor's name, but they talk about the flatline, right? Trying to flatline it, trying to quarantine ourselves. Don't go out if you don't have to. We're in this together. We're teammates, and it's true. And if we do that, if we are smart about this, then maybe within the next month or two, then we could potentially see some sports come back and people can go back out in public, larger events. We just got to kill this virus. We got to get it out of our systems. We got to get rid of it. And I just wanted to ask you personally, what do you think Major League Baseball will do scheduling wise? Like, do you think they'll play extended, like 162 games extended maybe into November, December, because maybe you could relocate some games? You could play in Texas with their stadium. You can play down in Florida. Or do you think maybe, hey, let's just start right after the All-Star break. Let's just play 81 games and we'll just take whatever. Or this is kind of a cool idea too that I thought of. You start whenever, and then you just have like a benchmark, like the first team in the National League to maybe reach 60 or 70 wins, and then the first team in the American League to reach 60 to 70 wins, and then they play for the World Series. There's a lot of things I've heard, different speculations of different fans, and I think it's really cool. And if you're in the chat, we welcome you to talk about this. Give us your thoughts, give us your opinions. But no, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think really what it all comes down to is how long is this going to be? Like, how long is it going to be before we start playing games? So right now it's at 2 weeks. From all the beat reporters and stuff that I've read on Twitter, no one believes it's going to be happening in 2 weeks, kind of like what you said earlier. So it really just comes down to how far is it going to go. If it goes a month, then maybe you see a scenario where they just take those months worth of games and tack them on to the end of the schedule, and then you still play a full 162.
Yeah.
Alternatively, maybe they just cut it down and play, 144 games or whatever, kind of like back in the 90s when they had those strikes for worker union stuff that they just played a shortened season. So, it really just kind of depends. I think that one of the things that has been talked about is like if they do either play a full 162 or if they decide to tack some games onto the end of the season, would be to do kind of like a neutral site playoffs / World Series.
You have to, right? Because you had to play in the warmer
Right.
climates. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and I guess it would depend too who makes it, because you have teams like the Brewers at Miller Park in the North, like they have a dome stadium, so
Right.
obviously they could play whenever. Or maybe you play your games in Miami or God forbid at Tampa, because that's just a
Well, it's
horrible
likely
place
though,
to
right?
play.
And same with the Astros still. There's a lot of stadiums now that have that over covering
Right, and
or
I
hybrid.
believe does the Rangers new park as well. Globe Life, I think, also has the
Yeah.
retractable roof. So there are plenty of options if they need to play further into what we consider now the off season that they can do that.
Bro, real quick. I want you to keep going. But dude, I saw like just 2 weeks ago or maybe a week ago, high school baseball is being played at US Bank Stadium. They were able to play, have a full dimensional field. That's not out of the question either for the Twins. If they were able to, because we talk about these teams that can make a playoff push, right? So,
Mhm.
but continue though. I just wanted to say that real quick.
Yeah, so basically that's the positive like way to look at it. The downside to that though is that if you extend the season past, the end of September and then start the playoffs in October, you're cutting down on the off season. The thing that you have to think about is how are the players going to take that? Because a lot of these guys that are, hitters and pitchers more specifically, they take a break off for a month, 2 months or whatever, and then they start these throwing programs or these hitting programs. And if they're going to be having a shorter off season, then that's going to take a huge toll on the way that they prepare and get ready for spring training. Then you also have to think about things like arbitration and contract negotiations, free agents, and stuff like that. That's going to be a shorter window for teams to negotiate with players
Mm-hmm.
as far as free agency goes. So there's a whole lot of it that's going to go into it. So it'll definitely be interesting to see what the MLB decides to do.
Well, I think it's interesting too because it's not just like NBA where you can just take maybe a week off and you're good. Because with baseball, it's a prolonged thing. We have guys that tear their labrums, guys that need to recover, and baseball is more routine based. I feel like than NBA. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's the bias coming out, but pitchers, right? They have to go at set times every fifth day, and that's going to mix things up too. And they're not used to those colder climates per se, or just a different atmosphere of I think we had maybe a handful of games of World Series being played in November. Reggie Jackson, Mr. November, right?
No,
So,
he's
no,
October.
October.
Jeter's
Jeter's
November.
November. Let's just forget I said that. I got the Yankee part right though. But you know what I mean? I know in 2017, Game 7 was November 1st. That was the game. But for me, I don't see Major League Baseball extending into December. Like you said, they have to have that off season. The arbitration is essential, especially getting guys like Shogo Akiyama from Japan, all these guys, Cuba, Dominican Republic. Baseball is one of the most diverse sports. Um, and we have to have the spring training. We have to have the spring training. You have to be able to see the prospects and give them a chance to build inside the organization. The way I see it, and this is like you said, 144 games. If you look at 162 games, so that kind of shaves off 18 games, right? So
Mhm.
that's still only not even a whole month of baseball.
Right.
So I think they don't come back till May. I really don't at the very beginning. And so I think you have to shave off almost 30 games. I think you just kind of pick up where you are, maybe that series where everyone can start and then you just go to the end of the season,
Yeah.
or you just play the 81 games after the All-Star break. But then you still have to have the All-Star break, right? So how does that work? Because you have to have All-Stars. Do you just kind of make it like a celebrity thing, or you could just kind of do a fan vote for the home run derby? It's just
Right.
kind
Yeah.
of
So I think that if they were to go the 81 game route, or honestly at this point, like if it gets far enough to where they cut the season down to like 130 games, then they might just skip the All Star break this year. Which obviously that
just give it
sucks.
to
It's a
the Dodgers next year or
huge
something.
type
Just
of
push it.
fan draw thing, but
That's smart.
if you get down to 81 games and you're already pushing because you don't want to deal with playing in colder weather, deep into November or possibly even into December, then you're probably not going to want to take off that whole week, you know. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's probably best for the players if they have some sort of break in the middle of the season to, take a week of rest and kind of recruit, especially for pitchers where obviously there's a ton of stress over the course of however many games on their arm. But I could see where the MLB would forego that depending on how many games they have to shave off the front of the season.
That's really smart. And I know for the NBA, they moved Charlotte. I think it was a couple years ago or something, because it was supposed to be in Charlotte one year and they pushed it back a year. They switched it. They could do that with MLB. Just make it at the Dodgers next year and then Braves the following year. Just push it back one year because
Right.
they'll still get that game. It's just going to be a little bit longer. Either way, all sports, man, they're just going to be taking a huge hit. We know that YouTube TV and Fox Sports finally reached an agreement. Now it's like, well, shoot, now there's no games to be broadcasted across
Right.
the United States. Everyone's starting to lose money, right? And everyone's starting to panic, but I don't think we need to hit that panic button yet. I think it's the media bias really coming out. You see people stocking up, just loading, like, okay, it's the domino effect. Now I have to do it. One person does it, I have to do it. And it's the same thing with sports. Like, we can't live without sports. We can't do this and that. But I'm telling you right now, when sports come back, just like what Matt Barnes said with the NBA playoffs, it's going to be electric. Like, it's going to make us be so more appreciative for what we have in the sports world. If you didn't like, let's say you didn't like NASCAR, you didn't like tennis, you didn't like golf, right? It's like now you can embody it and just kind of have like some more respect and like, because this is the first time ever I seriously think that there hasn't been any sports in our lives for everyone. And it's crazy. But I know I'm kind of going off track, but I guess if we go back to the whole baseball thing, I'm sorry, I'm going on tangents. No, I like what you said. They're getting rid of the All-Star break. They will still have to have some type of break, whether it's just 3 or 4 days. I think they could turn it into a celebrity thing. Like Trevor Bauer with his media company can cover. That's another thing I wanted to talk about before we dive into the previews. But yeah, man, this coronavirus, man, it's just taken over. But some good news is though for Major League Baseball. A lot of people like to be pessimistic and look at the negative side of things. Here are some positives. Alex Verdugo has time to heal his back, so maybe he doesn't miss the season now, right? Mike Leake, he had a fractured wrist. He was thrown in simulated games. He'll be ready. He'll be ready to go. Just other guys too. I know Justin Verlander, he just got shut down because of an arm strain. Now he has time to relax. He can, rejuvenate it and stretch it out, and he should be good to go. Like, this is good. Now this is going to be interesting for Major League Baseball. Now there's going to be teams, if it is a shortened schedule, then yeah, that 15 games, those first 15 games really do matter, and it is going to be crunch time.
Yeah, one of the names that you mentioned Verdugo, and the other Red Sox I would mention would be Chris Sale. He's a guy that we talked about at length. I don't know if it was last week or the week before about how he had arm problems, and they were like, well, you're just gonna have to rest it, and we'll see. And so, and you mentioned, and I think it's important to hit on that the first 15 games or whatever really do matter this year. You look at the Reds last season, everyone thought they were going to be roughly a 500 team, and then they come out and they go 1-8 to start the season. If you take away those first 9 games, they were 500 the rest of the year. Instead, they end, roughly like 8 or 9 games under. And so you can see where it's hard to climb back if you lose, let's just say that it's the first 16 games of the season. That's a tenth of your season right there. If they cut that down to, let's say, 81 games or whatever, suddenly that's 20% of your season in those first 16 games. So I don't know. It's definitely once the sport returns, it's definitely going to be something to watch the first couple of weeks. You just kind of got to hope that your respective team, whoever it is you root for, doesn't go like 3-7 the first week or worse. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch.
It will be. And one thing I thought about too, because I know this is on the Oakland Athletics schedule. I don't think it's in the beginning of the year, but hypothetically, let's say you're the Oakland Athletics, right? And it's around opening day. It's maybe your second series of the season. You play the Astros, the Red Sox, and the Yankees. Okay, so that's 9 games. That's a really tough stretch right there. 9 games. You wipe that clean. Now the Athletics are looking good, right? Because now they might have an easier schedule.
Right.
So that's one thing I like to think about too, because now if I look back at our divisions that we predicted, this is our last division, I think I might change some things. If I were able to actually break down their schedule, maybe I have the Braves now in first place instead of the Phillies.
Right.
Maybe the Mets now have a chance at making a wild card. There are so many viable options now for these teams that are right there in the bubble. And that's something that has struck my mind numerous times.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't thought about that, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
definitely an interesting point when you think about like what if so obviously the way that the MLB schedule is set up, obviously like if you're in the National League, then you play your division opponents a certain number of games.
Yeah.
Then like let's say you're in the Central Division, then you would play the East and West teams a certain number of games, and then you would match up against one of the AL teams divisions for any number of games.
Exactly.
But you got to think about if you have a shortened season, what if you're playing the AL West and your games against the Astros and the Athletics at the beginning of the year, and those get
Exactly.
cut out, and then suddenly all you have left to play is like the
The
Mariners,
Mariners.
and so suddenly then you've lucked out, and maybe your division rivals have to run through the Astros and like the Angels or something. So yeah,
Exactly.
that would definitely be a huge factor.
Yeah, and I know that's something no one has really thought about, and that's going to happen. That is going to happen because no matter what, I don't think they're going to play 162 games. I just don't. I don't think it's logistically possible. I think you have to start it with those games on that specific date because fans, for me, I buy tickets to games in the summertime just for the matchup. Imagine if you just shift everything and now it's like it's just all chaotic and everything like
Mm-hmm.
that. It would just be so much easier if you just cut it wherever you start. Doesn't matter if it's 154 games, 147 games, 115 games. You just have to start there and play out the season. Every team plays a certain amount. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's the only thing I could see possible that's feasible. But still, there's going to be a team that absolutely gets shafted. I hate to say it, but they will. They will. And teams that this is going to hurt, maybe make or break. The Tampa Bay Rays, the Boston Red Sox. Who knows? Maybe the Red Sox now have a playoff chance. You never know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like we said, the New York Mets, Cleveland Indians, White Sox. It's just throughout all the league, especially the NL Central. The NL Central is by far one of the most challenging divisions that we had to break down. So, whew, it's going to be interesting to see what they do for real.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But moving on, I wanted to talk about real quick. Last night, Trevor Bauer and his company Watch Momentum. I hope everyone got the chance to watch it. If you didn't, you need to search Watch Momentum. Get your baseball fix on. It wasn't as great as I thought it was going to be, but it was better than nothing. One of the best moments was when Coach Kent Murphy chimed in on Periscope. Did you watch it, Noah, by the way?
I was able to catch some of it. I caught the
You
Ken
did?
Murphy part that you're about to
Did,
go into. Yeah,
did you see the part with him and Dietrich?
yeah.
Dude,
He's challenged him, but
dude,
he
that's
delivered.
hilarious. Well, he's like, I forget what he said, but Derek Dietrich was a savage. He said, well, I don't know if this is real Kent Murphy or not. There's no verified check mark or whatever. And then, God, it was like one of the most savage things. And then, of course, Dietrich hit a home run, supposedly. And it was wiffle balls for charity. But, this is what we need. This is what we want. We want the media. We want to get personality out of these guys. So, what do you think about it?
Oh, I love it. I love everything that Watch Momentum does. Even before this whole coronavirus thing kicked off, we had mentioned them a little bit in part because of Trevor Bauer talking about, player personality. And that's something that in today's game that we don't necessarily get to see a lot of. And so, if you haven't ever checked out their stuff, go over their channel, check them out. It's a lot of really cool stuff. But it's a really interesting channel, that's for sure. I don't know. I
It
really
really
like it.
is.
I think that it's interesting to see what kind of innovative things people are trying to do with the coronavirus stuff happening. Like
Hmm.
one of the Reds accounts I follow on Twitter was like, "Hey, would you guys want me to once the season starts, like on March 26th, get on Twitch and stream like one Reds MLB The Show game from their schedule
See, that's what I'm
every
saying.
day,
Yeah, that would
and
be
just like
sweet.
so you can just watch a game, even though it's just like MLB The Show, but just
Yeah.
like do something like that." So I don't know. It's really cool.
Yeah, that would be awesome for real. I think that'd be unique, especially if every team did it. How cool would that be? Or like if they could have like someone in the department, maybe they play online head to head, and you get that atmosphere. It's like, okay, now we have something to watch. Like, okay, I could tune into this Twitch. That'd be smart for the media. It's like, okay, Reds official Twitch, Athletics official Twitch, Brewers official Twitch. That would be so cool, man. For real. And you can make it a whole thing. And like I know people would eat it up because there's literally no sports.
Oh yeah, I mean it's crazy what people are doing. I saw on Twitter, I can't remember what account I saw it from, but there were people that were literally because they wanted to get their gambling fix, were betting on the simulation of like NBA 2K games just because they wanted something to do. So it's crazy when you take away sports what people are willing to do to try and get the that sports fix.
No, it really is. But one last thing before we move into our preview is I want to say that the great thing that at least Trevor Bauer's company got to do, because you've seen it on his Instagram stories, they've had a lot of content, a lot of players come into their I guess their house or whatever place they rented, and we'll be able to see those videos come out in the future, probably about a month's worth of content, which will be nice, I think. So that'd be
Yeah.
something to look out for. Trevor Bauer, God bless you. Honestly, I love that man so much. He's good for baseball. Should we dive into the AL West now, or do you have any final thoughts, real quick?
My final thought is I definitely do not envy whoever the head of travel is for all these baseball teams that's going to have to deal with the scheduling nightmare once the season starts.
Yeah, logistics are going to be awful.
But yeah, other than that, we can get into it.
All right. Well, our first team, the Houston Astros. Bang bang, welcome. Let's just go ahead and get them out of the way. So things to report real quick. They don't really have any key additions. This is important, but granted, 81 home games last year in 2018, 2017 when they were accused and found guilty in 2017 at least of banging on trash cans, stealing signs, and we don't know about the buzzers yet. Kind of makes you question everything about these players. Are they actually as good as they are? Because in spring training this year, and I know it's just spring training, Altuve hit like 3 for 22 or something like that. It was not very good. Same with Springer. Springer got crossed up silly. Bregman didn't do very well. So it's kind of a small sample size. It is spring training. You hate to see it, but it's a lot of questions, right? But
Mhm.
some key subtractions. Let's talk about these. Number one, the biggest one across all of Major League Baseball, Garrett Cole went to the New York Yankees. The second one, Wade Miley to the Reds, Will Harris to the Nationals. So right there, that is 3 key pitchers from the Astros pitching staff that have departed. And then Robinson Chirinos, pretty good defensive catcher, still in the division, but went to the Rangers. So, I mean, actually, a key addition is Dusty Baker. I really do like that move, to be honest with you. Very old school and very respected manager across Major League Baseball. But what are your thoughts on, I guess, the one addition and then those 4 subtractions?
Yeah, so we can start with Dusty Baker. I'm a big fan of this too. Obviously as a Reds fan, I know a bit about Dusty Baker just because we had him here for such a long time. And he's really a player's manager. He's a guy that all of the players are going to come in and they're going to respect. And that respect is earned. And I think that really realistically, he's not going to be the long term solution for the Astros. Not really a guy that's, super analytically inclined, which kind of goes against kind of the way that the Astros have been for a while now.
Obviously.
And I mean, he was a guy that literally had like we would call it like veteran Sunday, where he would just clear the bench for the Reds, and then all the veterans would just like play. So you'd have guys like Jack Hanahan and
Oh
Xavier
my
Paul
gosh.
would be, and the rest of that bunch would all be in the starting lineup on the same day on like Sundays. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what happens with that. But I think what it does is it gives them a fresh face in the clubhouse, a guy that is trusted around the league. And I think for a year or two, it's just kind of going to be a different tone set in the clubhouse. One of like respect and respecting the game as a whole, and so, to kind of combat what's happened there the last couple of years.
Yeah, and they're going to have to figure it out too because the Houston Astros, their farm system isn't that good. They have Forrest Whitley, which was, a first round draft pick 2 or 3 years ago. But they're gonna have to rely on these guys in Major League Baseball, and it all starts with the manager, right? We do know that AJ Hinch, he said, "Oh, I take full responsibility for everything that happened. I should have shut it down, but I didn't." It's like, okay, but Dusty Baker, he's had a very valid reputation across Major League Baseball. Hypothetically, he could have won the World Series with the Reds in 2012. He was 1 game away from going to the NLCS. I mean, we know the Giants won the World Series, so you have to think, okay, well, if we would have beaten them, then for sure we would have won. I think who they played against that year? The Tigers? Was it? It had to be the Tigers, right?
I think so,
I
yeah.
think it was the Tigers because 2011 was the Rangers, 2013 was the Tigers again, I believe. Maybe it was the Rangers. I don't know, but I like Dusty Baker as well. But the huge subtractions of Garrett Cole, Wade Miley, Will Harris, just those 3 alone, that's really tough in that pitching staff. Granted, they're still going to be solid, but not as solid. And especially with these games being dispersed, maybe we don't play a full 162 games. You never know.
Yeah, obviously it sucks getting losing Garrett Cole is going to hurt no matter what. Um, obviously they have Justin Verlander and Zach Greinke to kind of head the rotation now, and then they're going to get Lance McCullers back from injury,
But we don't know how
and
he's going to be
then
though, unfortunately.
right, and then the guy that they brought up at the end of the year last year was Jose Urquidy, and he pitched really well for them, so he'll probably slot in at the 4. And then the 5 is kind of a question mark right now. It looks like it's probably going to be Josh James, who's a guy that's pitched for them out of the bullpen, can hit into the hundreds. Pretty good breaking ball, but he hasn't pitched out of the rotation in a while, so you got to wonder how he's going to transition to that. A guy that you mentioned for a top prospect of theirs, Forrest Whitley. Big. He's a 6'7". He's thinned out a ton from when he was in high school. But he's dealt with injury problems. He's dealt with just plain getting just lit up in the minors, and he's also I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, also had an 80-game PED suspension. So there's a lot of baggage to go along with him as a guy in the rotation. And then not to mention that you're losing Wade Miley, who until September when he started tipping his pitches was top 3 in the league as ERA as well. Will Harris is probably the one guy that I think that they're going to be best equipped to deal with losing. They've still got Roberto Ozuna and Ryan Presley out of the back of the bullpen, and then you throw in guys like Chris Davinsky as well to kind of help that. And then they brought back Martin Maldonado, which is kind of going to help with the Robinson Chirinos loss. But obviously that's going to be some offensive loss there. But at the end of the day, assuming that these players don't all drop off, which I don't think that they will, they've still got a pretty stacked lineup. So I think that they'll be okay.
I mean, I want to go back to that last comment real quick with Maldonado. He's not the same player defensively as he was back in 2016, where he led the league in caught stealings. He's gotten a little bit bigger, and he has tapered off just a little bit defensively, but he's still solid. I think they're willing to sacrifice that offensive production for 8 other guys that can get the job done, at least for the last 3 years, as we know. And you're probably right. They're probably not going to taper off as much, the other players, but I just don't know. I really don't, man, because those 81 games, we just don't know what's genuine, what stats are genuine, what stats aren't. And that's worrisome to me. I've lost respect for basically all these players, especially the 2017 ones. Not Brantley, because he wasn't a part of it. But, Josh Reddick was my favorite. He was my favorite player, man. That's the whole reason why I started liking the Oakland Athletics. And now, it hurts, It hurts me to see him, not care and think that he didn't do anything wrong. It really does. It aches, man. And I don't know how their production is going to be. For their sake, I actually do hope they prove us all wrong so we can get past this. Because if they do, that's good. I feel like we could kind of move past this. If they don't, though, it's just going to keep going on and on and on. So for their sake, I hope they do actually show the world across Major League Baseball that they can get the job done. But, let's go through the lineup real quick. Catching, they got Martin Maldonado, like you mentioned. At first base, Yuli Gurriel. Second base, Jose Altuve. Third base, Alex Bregman. Shortstop, Carlos Correa. In the outfield, we got George Springer, Michael Brantley, and Josh Reddick. And then the AL Rookie of the Year, Yordan Alvarez. So, what are your thoughts on this lineup, I guess, man? Because I know
my initial
go for it.
Thought is actually probably not where you think I'm going to go with this. And it would be the one guy that's missing from this lineup, and that would be Kyle Tucker. Kyle Tucker is one of their former prospects. I think he's had enough time in the big leagues now where he doesn't qualify as a prospect anymore. But for those of you that are Reds fans, he kind of has a similar profile build to Jesse Winker, a guy that can hit for some pop against righties, has good plate discipline, good control at the plate. So the thing that concerns me about it is that they now have Dusty Baker as the manager. And as I mentioned before, he's very old-fashioned. It seemed like at times he would play the age game. And so for that reason, I think Josh Reddick's still going to see the bulk of the time in one of the corner outfield spots, which I think kind of hurts Kyle Tucker's production because he's 24, 25 years old now, which is probably a time where he needs to be getting at bats. And it's funny that you mentioned Josh Reddick earlier as one of the guys that you lost respect for because he hit like 220 in like 2017. Like he did absolutely just horrible. And so it's just kind of interesting to, I guess, note that just because even with the trash can banging, he just was not very good that year. But the rest of their lineup, I mean, like I said, I don't think they're going to regress that much. And these are obviously Alex Bregman was second in MVP last year. Carlos Correa, when he's healthy, could be like an 8 WAR player. Jose Altuve is a guy that's usually at the top of the league in batting average. And then of course Yordan Alvarez, who came up last year, you mentioned as the AL Rookie of the Year. Only played in 87 games last year, but put up almost 4 WAR, 27 home runs, a 173 OPS plus in those 87 games. So I don't know. I still think they're going to be a force to reckon with.
Yeah, I do too. I don't want them to be, but if because like I said, no one knows what their production is going to be like because for all we know, maybe they didn't steal the signs, right? As many times, maybe it's only 2 games or 3 games, or it could have been all 81 home games for all we know. So I don't think they're going to regress that much. I don't think they're going to have as good a years, I should say, as past years.
Yeah.
I will say that. But yeah, I still think they're going to be pretty dominant in the AL West. There's, only one other team I really see kind of making a run on them, and we'll get to that team a little bit later. But yeah, but their bullpen, Chris Davinsky, he's kind of got misleading ERA. He's got like up in the fours, but he's a pretty valuable asset to their bullpen as well. He's got around a 1.3 WHIP, so very serviceable, very average, and they can have that. They can have that because they have that positive reinforcement with Justin Verlander, Zach Greinke, Lance McCullers if he comes back to the way he was before Tommy John, right? So I think this is still going to be a good team. Any final thoughts before we move on?
No, let's move on to our next team, the Los Angeles Angels.
Take it away.
All right, so I think we can all be in agreement that they got the biggest position player out of the offseason in signing Anthony Rendon at a 7-year, $245 million contract.
Great signing.
They also added to the rotation with Dylan Bundy in a trade from the Orioles, and then Julio Teheran. They signed on a 1-year, $9 million deal from the Braves. And I know that you're not going to like this, but I did list as the one key, in quotation mark, subtraction that they had Cole Calhoun.
Oh, man. My goodness gracious. Yeah, I'm not even going to speak upon that man's name. Dude, I really love that Anthony Rendon signing, I should say. Kind of surprised they were able to get this deal. Granted, they just spent over 400 plus mil on Mike Trout's contract. But they're going all in. They're getting the right pieces. I think we'll get to it a little bit later with their starting rotation, but really the missing pieces to this organization are those starting pitchers. Last year I think their ace was Matt Harvey. So, and it was named by Joe Madden that it was going to be Andrew Heaney. Did I say his name right? Andrew Heaney?
Yep.
Yeah, Andrew Heaney. He was going to be the opening day pitcher for the Angels. So that might be mid-April. It might be May. It might be June. We don't know yet. But moving on to Dylan Bundy. Dylan Bundy was a guy. He was a very, very, very high prospect in the Orioles organization. But he has never really lived up to the hype. Just a little bit above average, 4.79 ERA last year with a 1.35 WHIP. I mean, it's serviceable. I mean, you can. That's a good 4 or 5 guy, I guess, for most teams if you need somebody. But then they also got Julio Teheran. Teheran has had some decent years back in the past. He has battled with some injury issues, but another serviceable guy. 3.81 ERA, 1.32 WHIP. And a 4.66 FIP, which is pretty high, but still, if these guys can if Julio Teheran can revert back to the way he was back in 2015, good things could possibly happen. Then you speak upon I guess I will say something about Cole Calhoun. Glad he's gone. I know it's Mike Trout right now, and I guess Brian Goodwin, and I'm really surprised Justin Upton is still able to produce or hasn't really retired yet. He's not mobile at all, but I'm really, really, really looking forward to seeing Joe Adell here maybe this year, perhaps. So, I mean, yeah, man, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'll start with Dylan Bundy. I think that he has a chance to kind of be a breakout guy this year. I think once you get away from the cancer that is pitching for the Orioles in that hitter friendly ballpark where you just don't really have much incentive to win, I think going to the Angels where there's a track towards the future that I think is pretty clear. I think that might be some extra motivation. I think he's a chance to break out.
You have a better fit
People
too.
forget that he's only 27. I know, at least for me, I always forget that because it feels like he's been in the league for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, dude, for real.
He did come up really young, I think at like 19. So yeah, he's been in the league for like 8 years, but he's still only 27, which, is a time where a lot of pitchers come into their own, and really that's when they start to hit their stride and like their prime. And so, I think that it'll be interesting to see if he can do that in LA, kind of with some support, like we'll see once we get into the lineup.
Yeah, yeah, it'll be interesting, but they do have a good future ahead of them. They really do. The Angels do. It could be a change of scenery thing for Dylan Bundy as well. He'll have a better fit. Look at the King Felix, right? Has absolutely shoved. We
Mhm.
talked about that in the NL East preview, and I love when we get things right, Noah. That makes me so happy because that just that kind of solidifies us as somewhat being knowledgeable, right? So because we talked about King Felix real quick, just the change of scenery going to the Braves and everything like that, maybe reverting back to his Cy Young days or whatnot. The dude absolutely shoved in spring training. He had under a 2 ERA, and I think maybe 12 innings pitched. Very, very good for King Felix. But that could be the same thing with Dylan Bundy. Same thing with Dylan Bundy and Julio Teheran, right? These guys could just
Yeah.
see a shift potentially. Um, it's going to be hard, though, with some of these offensive threats on other teams. That's for sure. You want to go ahead and get into the lineup, or?
Yeah, so we can go and get into it. So at catcher they added Jason Castro this offseason. First base, pretty much the slowest man
I
in
cannot
baseball,
believe he's
Albert
still playing.
Pujols.
Oh my god.
At second base, a guy that's kind of been Twitter's favorite player here over the last 24 hours, David Fletcher. Third base, the newly addition of Anthony Rendon. Shortstop, Andrelton Simmons. And then in the outfield, Mike Trout, Justin Upton, and Brian Goodwin. And then at DH, Shohei Ohtani. What are your thoughts?
That's another thing too. We've got to mention, dude. Shohei Ohtani might be ready for opening day. He might be named opening day starter, perhaps, because he's supposed to be ready
Yeah,
by
that's
May.
possible.
He's supposed to be ready by May to throw at full. I totally forgot about Shohei, dude. Oh my gosh, that kind of changes a little bit too. Um, I don't mind this lineup. There's obviously big names. Albert Pujols. Albert Pujols isn't the Albert Pujols from 2005. He's not the Albert Pujols when he first signed his 10 or 11-year deal with the Angels. This is a guy who's probably 2-3 years older than what he actually says he is. But kudos to him for being able to still play and actually still offered up some production, right? He hit like 260 last year. You can't ask for much more than that. That's pretty good for the old vet, future Hall of Famer. David Fletcher, not only Twitter's favorite player today, but it's kind of like the Brock Holt of Boston. For those out there listening, Brock Holt, everyone was obsessed with him up in the New England area. It's the same way for LA, I guess. I don't get it. I don't understand why, but you know what? That's fine. Do you? I respect the drip, Karen. I respect it a lot. So, Rendon, like I said, dude, that is so nice. I'd say, age 31, 32 is honestly your prime in baseball as a position player. Because then you start to taper off a little bit. But they got him right in his prime, and he's always produced, man. He's always produced. He's been a very good defensive player. He reminds me defensively a lot like Josh Donaldson, a guy who will age in the next coming years, 34 years of age, and he'll still be able to play exquisitely at third base, which is good. And, Rendon is a guy, too. Later in his career in this contract, Pujols is going to be retired. Okay, move Rendon over to first base. Maybe you have a guy in your organization can come up, you put him at third base, and Rendon can still play in that position every now and then. So they made a really, really good signing for 7 years, man. I really, really like this. Their corner of their infield is going to be set for the next 13 years, 14 years, because they're going to have another prospect come up. So I like it a lot. Andrelton Simmons, this is another guy who could probably put up an 8-WAR season potentially. Very good. Tremendous shortstop. One of the best defensive shortstops in the game. And then obviously the GOAT, Mike Trout. Soon to have Mike Trout Jr. in October or something like that. I think it was August. Still produces. I guarantee. He's still my AL MVP favorite for this year. Dude just mashes baseballs. Um, dude, real quick, I love when he said about the Astros. Like if he said, if I knew it was coming, oh, it'd be dangerous. Could you imagine if Mike Trout got the banging of the trash cans? This dude already hit like over 300 and had almost 1,000 OPS season. Dude, imagine for 81 games out of the year, you just know exactly what's coming for Mike Trout.
Oh yeah, I mean he would be insane. But you got to think about though, Mike Trout really hasn't had like any sort of like protection in the lineup so far in LA. And now suddenly he's going to have Anthony Rendon, who's like, a top 10 player in his own right, hitting behind him. So now it's kind of like, well,
He's gonna get more
we can't really
fastballs.
pitch around, right? We can't really pitch around
Yeah,
Trout because now we're going to have to pitch to Anthony Rendon with Trout on base. And so honestly, it's possible we see an uptick, which is insane to say considering what Mike Trout's numbers already are, but we could see even more production out of Mike Trout this year. So
I guarantee
I
it,
don't know,
man.
it's going to be crazy.
It just sucks though, because you have to think of the sample size. So you'd have to recalculate everything because it's going to be a shortened season, I would believe. But just take it for a grain of salt. You have to project what those stats would be like for 162 games. That's what
Mhm.
you have to go off of. Um, because like you said, the protection that he did have was Pujols when he first came over from the Cardinals. 2012, 2013, when Mike Trout really just surged. Right, he had that protection. He was getting a lot of fastballs then, and then
Mhm.
Pujols started to taper off. And the Angels really never had a solidified position player on their team, other than I mean they had Anderson Simmons, but still, it's not like Simmons doesn't hit for power per se. It's more
Right,
contact.
he's not an offensive minded guy,
Right.
he's just
But
a
now you
stud
have but now
defensively.
you have Rendon. It's kind of like I just watched 61 yesterday with Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle. When they switched them, Mickey Mantle's offensive production went down, and Maris's went up because he was getting more fastballs. Mike
Right.
Trout is the best hitter in Major League Baseball. He can hit off speed, but now you give him more fastballs earlier in the counts, and if you fall behind in the counts, you got to give him fastballs. Mm, Pitchers are gonna be biting at the core, trying to figure out ways to get this man out. That's a really good take right there, man. I'm really glad you said that. But yeah, man, their bench: Tommy La Stella, Luis Ringifo, and then we mentioned Joe Adele. He'll probably make his presence known. I wonder if they waive that. What is it, like the 12-day thing to have an extra service year, or if they just kind of put that in effect when they do have opening day. Do you know about that? How that works per se?
I would guess that I mean, I don't know how they're going to handle it because it would hard. I don't know that they would just count this as none of the players having any service time for the year. Because for you to get a full year of service time, I think it's somewhere around 150 games or something like that, which is usually why we see teams like wait to pull up their prospects for the first 2 weeks of the season.
Right, right.
And so I don't know if they would just give no service time for a guy like Joe Adele or and give like and it would kind of work with everybody on the team. So like how do you count this as far as contract years go and stuff like that? Like it'll be interesting to see, maybe not so much in guys that have contracts already decided, but the guys that are kind of in their renewable contract years and the guys that are starting to enter their arbitration years, how this is going to get handled. I honestly, I'm not really sure how they're going to go about it, but it'll definitely be something to watch.
Yeah, it'll be something to watch for sure. And I really don't think the Angels are going to be a bad team. I think people need to understand what they have and what they're going up against. I don't think they're going to be a bad team at all. I think their situation is honestly kind of like the Red Sox this year in a way. They have some versatile players. They have some pop, and if you put Joe Adele in there, what if he takes off like Mike Trout? That's going to be really dangerous, right? Then
Mhm.
you got three players right there that can just absolutely mash the ball. Um, but yeah, we look at the rotation real quick. As we mentioned, Andrew Heaney, he was named the opening day starter. Julio Teheran, Dylan Bundy, Matt Andriese, Patrick Sandoval, and then you have to throw Shohei Ohtani in there. He'll fill in the void, whichever pitcher isn't producing. But then you can move one of those starters to the bullpen because they definitely need help there too. Their best pitcher from last year, who came out of nowhere, he was actually on my dynasty team, was Hansel Robles. Right, Hansel Robles. He was a guy who struggled. He was more of a pitch to contact pitcher, but now he came like a power slider, power curveball pitcher last year, and he was dominant. I'd like to see him come back at it again. What are your thoughts on their bullpen rotation?
Yeah, I think that the Angels are one of the teams that's going to benefit the most from this late start to the season. You mentioned Matt Andriese and Patrick Sandoval at the back of the rotation. those are guys that aren't going to be in the rotation when everyone's healthy. Obviously, you mentioned Shohei Ohtani is the guy that would take one of those spots, but the other guy that'll probably take the other spot is Griffin Canning. Now, that's a
I
guy that was a
forgot about
former
him.
top prospect of
Yeah.
theirs that came up and he pitched last year, and he's roughly league average last year, but he's a guy that you expect to continue to grow as a player and get better. And then he got hit with arm problems here in spring training, like a lot of other pitchers have. And so, having that extra time off to try and rest and hopefully he doesn't need surgery, maybe by the end of May or whatever he slots in, and then at that point their rotation's probably not looking that bad because suddenly instead of Dylan Bundy being your like 2, he's like your 3 or 4, and so I think that they're going to benefit a lot from the late start of the season.
And I hate to bring up a sore spot for a lot of baseball fans out there, but it's important to mention too. Like, it'd be nice to see Tyler Skaggs in this rotation. It really would, because having a nice lefty in there with a very very good curveball, it mixes up the rotation very well. You look at most of these pitchers; they're more power righties. They're all very similar in a way. So it would have been nice to see that, man. Rest in peace to Tyler Skaggs. You hate to see it, man. Just mourning the loss of him. Um, but yeah, man. I mean, it's they're up and coming, man. It'll be interesting to see Griffin Canning. I think he just has just more to not really to prove, but just he just got to do his thing, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
any final thoughts?
Nope. I think we should get into your favorite team, the team that the hat that you're donning. You want to go ahead and introduce us here?
Of course, I would love to, Noah Gayhart. So for those watching, I don't even think it's a thing that I have to even mention, but I am an Oakland Athletics fan. We're gonna break down the Oakland A's. They really didn't make any key additions this year. Um, Oakland A's are always just a small market team. This is why I love them. Different players coming in and out, and it really shows their management how good Bob Melvin is. I'm going to start off by saying that Bob Melvin is seriously one of the best managers in baseball. You talk about Kevin Cash, Rocco Baldelli, who won it last year, but Bob Melvin is taking these players through the farm system, putting them right in the fire, and producing, right? Just a phenomenal job by him. There have been some key subtractions, though, for the Athletics. Blake Trinan had a monster 2018 season. He had under a .95 whip in that year. He was gross. He threw a 99-mile-per-hour sinker. He still does. He just fell off, man, in 2019. It was crazy to see the difference, how you just flip a 180 like that. I've never seen anything like that from a reliever who was just so dominant. We actually got Blake Trinan in that deal for Sean Doolittle and Ryan Madsen, and that's where we also got Jesus Luzardo. So we definitely won in retrospect with that. Blake Trinan, though, went to the Dodgers, so we don't have to worry about him in division, because usually when you lose relief pitchers, most teams will pick up those guys to stay in the division because they know their weaknesses. They know what they can throw, their power pitches. So that's very good news, not only for the Astros, for the Angels, for the Mariners, but for the Athletics. So they don't have to worry about facing Blake Trinan unless potentially the World Series. Another subtraction, I would call this, I wish I could just highlight this and put it on a billboard because this is so great. The Athletics got rid of Jerkson Profar. He was traded to the Padres. I absolutely love this because Jerkson Profar was not good, and he actually made me really mad in the wild card game last year because he had a runner on third base with less than 2 outs, and I forget, he did something really dumb, and I didn't like it. But the one that kind of sucks, it's kind of a sore spot for me, is Tanner Roark. Tanner Roark, he started the season with the Cincinnati Reds last year. Didn't fare out well because it was a hitter's ballpark. Tanner Roark was a pitch to contact type of pitcher. He'll give you the 1.3 whip, very average in those standards. But you bring him to Oakland, and you have guys like Ramon Laureano in the outfield, Steven Piscotty, Robbie Grossman. You have guys that have some decent range out there. It's a pitcher's ballpark, first and foremost. He did so much better. I don't have his numbers right in front of me, per se, for his numbers at Oakland, but I know they were better than Cincinnati. He signed with the Toronto Blue Jays, which yet again is another pitcher's ballpark. I guarantee he will fare out very well. He'll be a solid 3 or 4 pitcher for their organization. And yeah, man, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't really see any of the losses that they had hurting them
No.
that much. I mean, obviously, if Blake Trinan turns into Blake Trinan of 2018, then that's a guy you would have liked to have had around still. But I don't think that they lost Jerks and Profar and they replaced him with Tony Kemp. I don't see the production really being that different there. And, yeah, they lost Tanner Roark in the rotation, but they also have a guy that's going to step up and be a big part of the rotation this year, and Jesus Luzardo, who I know is going to be a guy that's going to be
Gross.
definitely in the competition for Rookie of the Year. So I don't really think that any of the subtractions that they had are going to hurt them. So they're probably going to be pretty similar to what we saw last year.
Yeah, I think they'll be similar. And I know we're going to talk about them in the standings. But yeah, so in Oakland, I mean, his numbers weren't drastically different, but I mean, his whip went down to a 1.35. With Cincinnati, it was a 1.42. So, and I know his FIP was probably better. His ERA was 4.58, but I think his FIP had to be lower, man. I mean, he just had way better defensive players that could get the job done for him. I guess if you want to say a key addition, or I guess an addition would be Matt Harvey that they picked up on waivers, but we'll just go back away from that. But yeah, man, if you look at Jesus Luzardo last year, so he pitched in only 6 games, and he also appeared in the wild card game, and he threw, a scoreless inning. Throwing a rookie in the fire like that's pretty impressive. 1.5 ERA. In 12 innings pitched, he only gave up 5 hits. He struck out 16 batters in 12 innings. 16 batters in 12 innings. That is disgusting. Also, if you look at his spring training just from this year alone, a 1.08 ERA. He struck out 13 batters in the 3rd innings. He's destined for greatness, and it's a biased opinion, but it's also unbiased. Like, Jesus Luzardo is the real deal. He really is, and I really do think he has a chance of winning Rookie of the Year. Not a lot of times you see it where a pitcher wins it, but I'd like to see the script being flipped on this one. So I really, really like Jesus Luzardo. You want to get into the lineup?
Yeah. So at catcher they got Sean Murphy, and then at first base, the guy that took a big step forward last year, and Matt Olson. Second base, Tony Kemp. Third base, Matt Chapman. Shortstop, guy that was in the MVP running last year, Marcus Semien. In the outfield, Ramon Laureano, Mark Cannon, Robbie Grossman. I'll probably also see a lot of time from Steven Piscotty out there. And then at DH, Mr. 247 himself, Chris Davis.
My dude, Chris Davis. Oh, man. Listen, I love this lineup. One of the biggest questions that I had was this past year was who's going to be the catcher now? Who's going to really step up? Who's going to be that guy to really help the Athletics? Because Jonathan LaCroix, he left. Josh Fagley had a breakout season in 2018. And in 2019, it's just kind of like, you're scratching your head, right? You're scratching your head. Well, this guy, Sean Murphy from Centerville High School in Dayton, Ohio, has absolutely shoved. He's been unbelievable. He came up quickly, and he definitely earned that starting spot at catcher. Hit well over 350 in just his short time in the majors last year. Matt Olson, back-to-back Gold Glove winner at first base. That's my dude right there. Ole, I love you. I know you're probably not listening or watching, but we love you over here in good old Kentucky. Tony Kemp. Now, this is a guy who came up in 2017, right? And he mentioned that he wasn't part of the sign stealing. He refused to do it. So I respect the guy for doing that, right? Not bad per se, but second base is the biggest hole, has been the biggest hole for the Athletics for the past 6 or 7 years. A lot of people can argue Jed Lowry. Well, he was good, right? I mean, he hit for average, but his OBP was never outstanding. It was maybe 320. I'd like to see a guy get to 340 at least with OBP and have some decent slugging percentage. Tony Kemp, though, can steal bases, which I like. I think if you put Tony Kemp in the lineup, though, he'll be like an 8 or 7 hole hitter, just 7 hole, because he'll see more fastballs. He could get on base. But then at third base, you got my boy Matt Chapman America, as I call him, Matt Chapman. Back-to-back platinum glove winner. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, platinum glove. The best third baseman in all of Major League Baseball. And he had to beat out his former high school teammate, Nolan Arenado, to do so. Matt Chapman has really progressed in Major League Baseball. I remember when Josh Donaldson left, this guy, Matt Chapman, came up in the league. Or no, it was after Brett Laurie. After Brett Laurie left. So after Donaldson, it was Brett Laurie, who I despise. He's my second least favorite player after Cole Calhoun. And then it was Chapman in 2017. And immediately I was like, this is going to be the next Josh Donaldson, just progressing, hitting like phenomenal defenses there. 5-tool player at third base. It's hard to say a 5-tool player at third base. It really is. Matt Chapman is the definition of that. Okay? Not only has he won Platinum Glove of the Year, this guy has speed. He's got the arm strength. And every year, you look, he's progressing with his hitting. He's been a guy who hit maybe 240, 250. You know, always a question like, can he get it done? Can he do this? Can he do that? But now he's starting to break out. He's starting to get to the 280 mark almost, right? He's starting to get there. And he even says, yeah, my defense is there, but, I'm just going to focus on offense now. That's dangerous. And he can hit for a lot of power. At shortstop, Marcus Semien. Semien was one of the worst defensive shortstops in Major League Baseball 3 years ago. A nice guy, kind of like Dusty Baker, named Ron Washington came in, worked with the infielders. And Ron Washington's now with the Braves. I don't know what voodoo or magic he does with these infielders, but it works. Right away, Marcus Semien flipped. He made 65 errors, 3 or 4 years ago in one season. That is horrific. Last year, he was he finished second or something like that in the Gold Glove for shortstop.
I believe so, yeah.
Something like that, which is insane. That's a huge turnaround. You can't ask for much more. And you look at his stats hitting, you see a huge astronomical leap. He hit 285 last year. His OPS was 891. He slugged 33 bombs, which was a career high. He jumped 40 points in batting average. This guy came out of nowhere, and he's only 29 years old. You can't ask for much more right there, big boy. I love it. I love this guy so much. I love the team chemistry here in Oakland. And then you got my boy, Ramon Laser Laureano, throwing out guys from the warning track. He's got the best arm in Major League Baseball in the outfield. There's no question about that. That is a biased opinion and an unbiased opinion. Well, no, it's an unbiased statement. And Mark Canha. Mark Canha just strictly hits for power. He rakes lefties, and he mashes curveballs. And then you got Robbie Grossman and Chris Davis as the DH. On the bench, you got Steven Piscotty, Chad Pinder, and Franklin Barreto. But I know I've talked for a lot, and I'm so sorry, Noah. What are your thoughts on this lineup?
Well, honestly, I mean, you haven't left much unsaid. The guy that I was going to highlight was Matt Olson. Like you mentioned, back-to-back Gold Glove awards. Put up 5.4 WAR last year, 36 home runs, 137 OPS plus. And, I think after last season, he's probably kind of put himself on the pedestal as being the best first baseman in the American League. And, honestly, I think he's just going to continue to jump those ranks as far as in the MLB goes. I mean, there's not really a whole lot that would be left ahead of him. I mean, maybe you look at Freddie Freeman, especially since he's going to be healthy for the first time in his career this year, is a guy that might still be ahead of him a little bit.
Oh, for sure. He's way ahead of him.
Maybe Paul Goldschmidt, depending on how you feel about him. Pete Alonso is a guy that, jumped on the scene last year, and it'll be interesting to see how his career continues forward. But, he's put himself into that mix as a top 5 guy as far as first baseman goes. And so, I don't know. I mean, the A's definitely have a lot going for them. They didn't lose anything last year that much of note. And so, I expect them to be competing in the playoffs come the end of the season.
Yeah, and the big thing for me, when you don't lose players, because this isn't just the first year they haven't lost anybody, it's the second year, really, where they haven't lost a key component. That's important to mention for any team. It doesn't matter if you've lost a lot of games before or you won 110 ball games. When you have team chemistry, you're going to play better. Like, it's just inevitable. You're going to play better. And I love the team chemistry. Bob Melvin has a culture there, and it's just unprofound. Like, I don't even know how to express it. He's just done such a tremendous job in Oakland, man. And I love watching these guys play. And my favorite thing that I'm going to say about them is, after a long day of class or something like that, it's 10 o'clock Eastern time. That's when I have free time, right? I can watch the Athletics play on the West Coast. It's nice. And then whenever they come to visit, it makes it that much sweeter, that much more genuine when I get to watch them play, because I don't get that opportunity to as much. Sometimes I don't get to go to Cleveland, but when they play in Cincinnati every 4 years or so, it's really nice to see, man. And I went to Chicago last year to watch them play, and I'm going out there with my cousin to watch them play the Indians on my birthday, and that's going to be exciting. I hope I can meet some players or something like that. because my cousin actually knows Sean Murphy personally. I don't know how, but she does. So I'm gonna try and just nag her for that. Like, hey, I need you to help me out. But we got a comment in the chat saying A's throwback jerseys are probably top 5 in MLB. I'd like to know which top 5 or which throwback jersey you're talking about. Which ones the ones I think they're probably talking about are the Raleigh Fingers era, like the 80s, the white kind of vests with like the neon green like little arm sleeves, stuff like that. Those are pretty nice. I actually like their Kelly Green jerseys the best though. I got the Kelly Green hat on, but the Kelly Green jersey, dude, just looks so clean. I actually have, if you haven't checked out my top 5 favorite uniforms, you need to go check it out because they're in there. I'm not going to tell you what number they are, but they're in there. Dude, another thing to look out for too is the rotation. I think Mike Fiers, he's going to have a spark lit in him this year. Mark Fiers has gotten the job done with the Athletics. He fits the culture. He's got that edgy side of him. He threw a no-hitter against the Cincinnati Reds last year. And it was honestly like, of course it would be against the Reds, like my favorite National League team.
Yep.
But like, he's a good pitcher. He's not a number one, but Sean Manaea is a number one by far. Sean Manaea, he was electric. He pitched in I think 6 games when he came back in September, and he had under a 2 ERA, and he was way ahead of schedule. He wasn't even supposed to be pitching in a real game until maybe the playoffs. It does suck though that he just lost it somehow in the playoffs, but whatever. Frankie Montas will probably be the number 2. Frankie Montas, he served a PD suspension, which makes sense now why he absolutely shoved for no reason at all. He'll be in that number 2 just for those numbers probably, and he is still very strong and stuff like that, and he can still get the job done. It'll be interesting though if he can put up those similar type numbers. But then you got Jesus Luzardo. Jesus Luzardo will probably be the number 3, like we said, nasty. He came from the Nationals trade when we got Blake Trinan. We shipped off Sean Doolittle, who's arguably one of the best closers in baseball right now, and Ryan Madsen, who at the time was disgusting. So we got him, and then one that I'm just not too keen on right now is Chris Bassett. But a number 5 pitcher, that's okay. That's okay. I actually would have really liked the Athletics to re-sign Homer Bailey. Homer Bailey did really well with the Athletics. I know you're like, wow, Rob, wow. I want to give him 10 years, $134 million or something, but or is it $234 million? It was a big contract. I don't know, but
5 years, like 105, I think.
Okay,
was the Reds extension.
I was way off then. Anyway, but Homer Bailey did phenomenal with the Athletics. Good 5 guy. He had a 1.3 something WHIP, mid 4 ERA. You can't argue with that, especially in a pitcher's ballpark. I like it. And he's got that grit to him, right? Edgy side of Homer Bailey. That's what we like to see. But their bullpen, man. Their bullpen. Liam Hendricks had the best year of his career. The Australian, eh? The Australian guy himself, Liam Hendricks. Sorry if I'm just making everybody cringe right now. But he was nasty. Had under a 2 ERA. Appeared in over 70 games of relief. He's very petite, very good still at his age, which is surprising. He's almost nearing 40 and still being able to shove. Joaquin Soria kind of falling off a little bit. Jake Diekman, not a big fan. But Lou Trevino, that's another good guy to look out for too in the bullpen. I mean, what are your thoughts on the rotation and bullpen, my dude?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got a lot of guys that you kind of know what you're going to get out of them. Mike Fiers is a guy that's been in the league for a little while now. You can say the same about Petit, Soria, Trevino, and Diekman in the bullpen as well. And then you've got the guys that have the chance to be stars. I mean, you mentioned Liam Hendricks, is a guy who's probably a top 5 reliever in baseball. Sean Manaea, who's in his early to mid 20s, is a guy that could break out and have a Cy Young season. He's got that type of potential. You could say the same thing for Jesus Luzardo. Maybe not next year, but the next 2 or 3 years, he's a guy that's going to be probably at the top of this rotation and one of the best pitchers, at least in that division, if not in the whole American League. So
and AJ Puck too.
There's
Don't
a lot
about him.
Yeah, and AJ Puck, especially if he can stay healthy, that's going to be another huge addition for their rotation. So I think that this is a team that's poised to compete.
Yeah, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Let's move on now. We're kind of running a little bit behind schedule. Let's move on to the Seattle Mariners. Let's just kind of pick it up a little bit. real quick, there are no key additions for the Seattle Mariners, which is devastating to see if you are a Mariners fan. It should make you sick to your stomach. Um, I don't know if they realize that they don't have anything to compete for or what, but you also lost a very good offensive production catcher in Omar Narvaez and Domingo Santana. Those are two big blows, man. Two big blows, but they do have some high prospects coming up that will be seeing some playing time this year. Their lineup, you got Tom Murphy, Evan White at first, Shed Long, the former Red prospect, at second, Kyle Seager at third, J.P. Crawford at short, Kyle Lewis, Malk Smith, Jake Fraley in the outfield. I love Malk Smith. And then Daniel Vogelbach as a designated hitter. What are your thoughts on the subtractions and the lineup?
Yeah, I don't think that this is necessary. I don't think their subtractions are necessarily as big as what a lot of people think. Omar Narvaez is already 27. He's a guy that should be on a competing team, and the Mariners aren't going to be that.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's obviously a kind of not really a huge loss for them, especially when they have a guy like Tom Murphy that can pick up that place for them. A guy that's going to be interesting to watch this year is Evan White. He's a former top 100 prospect that they extended. Kind of was before you even get to the majors, sign a contract extension, and so they did that with Evan White. And so it'll kind of be interesting to see how that plays out, because that's become a thing that's become pretty more prominent here in the past couple of seasons. Shed Long and J.P. Crawford, a couple guys up the middle that are prospects that I think are going to be pretty good, but those are guys that don't have a lot of time in the big leagues yet, which is kind of the theme of this team. And the one guy that I would say, if you're a Mariners fan, don't get too attached to is probably Kyle Seager. It wouldn't surprise me if he's on the move. He's kind of getting towards the back end of his contract, and he's pretty much the biggest cap eater on this team, at least of what I can remember. And so it wouldn't surprise me if he's a guy that gets dealt at the trade deadline.
Watch him go to the Dodgers. That'd be so cool. They don't really need him, I'd say, but that'd be cool though.
I don't want him to go to the Dodgers because the Dodgers have enough talent. So,
nah, I feel you. I could actually see him go to the Cardinals. Cardinals would be a really good fit for Kyle Seager, because Matt Carpenter is just not the same Matt Carpenter that he was in 2013, 2014. J.P. Crawford, he was part of that trade when Gene Segura, they just basically switched. They basically flopped, which I thought was kind of ironic. It was a straight up trade. I guess they wanted the prospect at the time. He didn't have enough MLB service as of yet, but it seems like the Phillies kind of won that deal as of right now. But yeah, man, Daniel Vogelbach, he can hit some home runs and everything like that, but he didn't hit for average very well. I think he hit only maybe 220 last year.
So, I think it was 208. I think you might be even being generous at 220.
Being generous. I mean, he just... Oof. Yeah, so their bench, though, D. Gordon, that's a guy who could slide in as well. He'll probably get some playing time for sure. Carlos Gonzalez, that was a minor league signing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, and Mitch Haniger, and that's what kills them. Mitch Haniger could also be a guy that could be dealt eventually too, but that is kind of your face of the franchise, in my opinion. He does have a sports hernia right now, which is not good. We know that Luke Voigt had a similar injury as well. Thankfully, Luke Voigt did not need surgery. Do you know if Mitch Haniger needed surgery, or is he just kind of waiting it out?
Yeah, no, he had to get surgery, so he's kind of on the mend from that.
Okay, how long is that recovery time?
I think they're expecting him back sometime at the end of May, early June. So obviously, this is another guy that's going to be a candidate for, depending on how long it is till the season starts, he could be back sooner rather than later.
Yeah, so if your team's with those type of injuries, you're actually kind of thankful in a way, I guess, if you have to look at the positive side of things. But yeah. The rotation, we got Marco Gonzalez, who's their ace. King Felix, as we know, is not shipped. That is another subtraction you could probably add. He went off on a minor league deal to the Braves, as we mentioned earlier on in the podcast. Yusei Kikuchi, who has not lived up to the hype yet as a rookie last year. Justice Sheffield, he was a huge prospect for the Yankees. He got shipped to Seattle. Was that when?
This is the Paxton deal.
The Paxton deal, okay.
Yep.
Okay, and then Kendall Graveman, who was not good at all with the Athletics. Not a very good pitcher, in my opinion. And then Taijuan Walker, which is an interesting addition for the Mariners in a way, just for the fact that he has battled Tommy John for the past 2 seasons. It's taken him a long time to recover. So don't know what you're going to get there. You know what I mean? What do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting signing with Taijuan Walker. This is a guy that's not back to 100% yet. He's yet again another guy that's probably going to benefit from the late start to the season because he still needs to build up velocity. I think one guy that we might see if the Mariners want to really buy into the young route is Justin Dunn. It's one of their top prospects as a pitcher.
I'm excited to see that guy.
A guy with a pretty good repertoire, a guy that I think he's got a lot of confidence, kind of more of a bigger personality type of guy, and so I think he's a guy that would be good for the game of baseball. So hopefully he gets up sooner rather than later.
Yeah, Justin Dunn. If you haven't seen the piece on him yet with Trevor Bauer with Watch Momentum, I highly suggest you watch that. It lets you inside of his life a little bit, and that's good, right? We want to get to know these guys before they get to the major leagues, so then we can follow them, give them a following. He's a very nice guy, and he's got the stuff. I'll tell you that. He's got the stuff for sure. Their bullpen's not very strong at all. The Mariners. Matt McGill and Sam Tuivailala. So, any final thoughts on the Mariners before we move on to the Rangers, our final team?
Yeah, they're gonna come dead last. I hate to spoil the standings, but they're they're just way below everybody else in this division right now. So sorry, Mariners fans.
We still love you though. We still love you, and you have some pretty good throwbacks. You got some good throwback uniforms, so don't feel too bad. You produce King Griffey Jr. We love you. Okay, so moving on to the Texas Rangers. New stadium, new uniforms, new team? Huh? I don't know. Corey Kluber, he was acquired via trade from the Indians. Very small sample size from last year. A very elevated ERA at 5.8. But you look back at 2018 and even 2017 when he won the Cy Young, this is a very good addition for the Rangers. I like him down there, especially they have their new stadium, so ventilation is there. They don't have to worry about overheating. Kluber can go deeper into the games. I think it'll be interesting, though, to see how they start him off, because they probably will only let him go maybe 6 innings at most just to see how his arm is progressing and whatnot. But I really, really, really like this addition. Kyle Gibson, this is another one I actually like. A little bit less than average numbers, you could say. But, he averages a strikeout per inning. It's pretty nice. So he's got some stuff. The ERA is elevated, though. What did Gibson come from the Twins? Did he play in the Twins?
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I thought.
Yeah, it was the Twins last year.
That's what I thought. So his FIP probably isn't that much different than his ERA then. Actually, it might be more than his ERA now that I think about it. But he's got a 1.44 whip. I mean, if he can throw strikes, you can't really argue for much. Their new ballpark is pitcher friendly, I should say. And then Jordan Lyles, good signing. 2 years, $16 million, 58 2/3 innings pitched, 2.45 ERA, 56 strikeouts, and that 58 2/3 innings in a 1.1 whip. What are your thoughts on the additions?
Yeah, you mentioned new stadium, new uniform, and the question mark on the new team. I think really it's just new rotation. They really bought into it this year. Obviously, they had Mike Minor and Lance Lynn last year, who were both, I believe, top 10 in Cy Young voting at the end of the season. And so then you add a former Cy Young, Corey Kluber, a couple guys at the back of the rotation that, have been in the league for a little while now and can at least give you some innings out of the back of the rotation. So, I like the moves for them. I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. I still think that they're behind some of the other teams in this division, as we'll see kind of when we get to the standings. But, I think these are good additions for them. Do you want to go ahead and get into the lineup, or do you have any final thoughts as far as that goes?
I will mention the subtractions real quick. They don't have Nomar Mazara, who's a player that I really like, that I know Noah isn't completely sold on just yet. But he was traded to the White Sox, and then as well as Emmanuel Clase, he was shipped to the Indians for Corey Kluber. Emmanuel Clase is a guy who can throw a 100-mile-per-hour sinker. Very nasty. Unfortunately, he's injured right now. But yet again, that could be a guy who could be benefited from this late start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But in their lineup, the Astros catcher from last year, Robinson Chirinos, you're going to get that. Maybe you'll get a 230 average offensively, which isn't bad considering the catching market nowadays. Defensively, still can help you out. Ronald Guzman at first base. You got Rougned Odor at second, Todd Frazier at third, Elvis Andrews at short, Joey Gallo in the outfield, Danny Santana, and Nick Solak. And then you have Shin-Soo Choo, who I'm surprised is still playing as the DH. Now, if you look at this team real quick, Noah, you look back at their, if you had these guys when they were in the World Series last, or 2015, let's say 2015, and that's the year they lost to the Blue Jays in that very, very emotional Game 5 of the ALDS. If you take this team, put them in 2015, they might make the World Series. They might make the World Series, perhaps, just based off of offensive production. Now, one guy for me that stands out is Joey Gallo. Joey Gallo really just went on a tear. They're using him as the face of the franchise now, which is insane. Joey Gallo is a guy who barely hit over the Mendoza line his entire career. Then all of a sudden, he actually hit over 300 before the All-Star break last year. And then he kind of got the Aquino effect in him a little bit. But dude mashes home runs. He's actually very quick for his size, very agile. He's got a decent arm, and he can play multiple positions. This is a very good player for the Rangers if you really think about it.
Yeah, he kind of is like, he reminds me of like a skinny version of Adam Dunn in the sense that
A little bit skinny.
before last year, it was pretty much strikeout, walk, or home run. Now, obviously, you saw the big uptick in batting average this year. Obviously, I hope he can keep that moving forward, because if so, then he's going to be an absolute star as far as baseball is concerned in the near future. But, I would say that he's definitely the one player that's like a head and shoulders above everybody else in this lineup. I think once you get past him, you're looking at guys like Shin-Soo Choo and Robinson Chirinos, who are in their late 30s. Rougned Odor, who's kind of like on his last leg in Texas because he's kind of struggled the past couple of years. Todd Frazier's another guy, and the same with Elvis Andrews. Like, they have a lot of guys that are aging players, and so I think that they're just kind of buying time until they can get that next wave of prospects up and into their lineups. A setback from one of the guys that was a big prospect that was expected to do big things in the lineup this year is Willie Calhoun. Caught that fastball off the jaw and got a fractured jaw, and so he's going to have to miss some time.
But hey, he'll be able to recover potentially.
Yeah, so I think if you look back at the other teams that we've covered so far, I don't think that the Rangers have a real shot at necessarily competing this year. I think they're probably going to hover somewhere around 500 to a little bit below, depending on what they're able to get out of their pitching staff. How do you feel about it?
No, I agree, and it all comes down to the pitching staff, because there is an uptake on their pitching with Corey Kluber coming in, and I still like Jose Leclerc a lot out of the pen. Jesse Chavez is a guy who can be a starter or a reliever. He kind of split time last year. I see him more as being a guy in the pen. Ariel Hirado, that's a guy who could maybe just shove, or he could kind of deplete, kind of like he did back in 2018. So it just kind of depends. But I don't know. They could win the amount of games that you have in their standings. It could be maybe a little bit below 500, or they could be a team that could also just lose like 65 ball games. It just depends, really. Or win 65 ball games, So I think it matters on their pitching, and especially in a tough division.
Yeah. So do you want to, since we've talked about it a little bit, do you want to go ahead and get into the standings?
Yeah. So I think it's important to mention, usually Noah and we are both going to read our standings, but after looking at his, we legit have the exact same standings and pretty much the exact same wins and losses. For the first two teams, I was extremely torn, and I try to be as unbiased as possible when I do these things. So as much as I hate to say it, the Houston Astros are going to win the division, and Noah has the Astros as well. We have the record at 98-64, so they're going to be winning the division. So they'll be the 2 seed in our projected playoffs. Oakland's right behind them, 94-68. The last 2 years, Oakland Athletics have won 97 ball games, which is unheard of for a wild card team. And I was torn, right? I actually would have had the Athletics in first place if this season wasn't delayed. And the only reason for that is because Verlander probably would have missed the first 2 to 3 weeks of the season with that arm strain that he was dealing with. But now, since we have a delay, everyone's coming back healthy, it's hard to say anyone's going to beat the Astros. Like I said, I don't know what their production is going to be like now that they're going to have MLB crawling down their back. But still, Astros, Athletics, and then we have the Angels in third place at 84-78. In a couple years, this could be a team that maybe gets back up there to winning 89, 90 ball games. Mike Trout has only been in the playoffs once since he made his mark in 2011. I don't remember what year that was. I would like to say it had to be 2012 or 13. It had to be like early on in his career. Um, but then we have the Texas Rangers in fourth at 78 and 84. So, like I just mentioned a couple minutes ago, depending upon pitching, also upon hitting, they could win 78 ball games. They could also lose 65 ball games. Win 65 ball games. Gosh. If you lose 65 ball games, you're in good shape. Sorry. So we have the Rangers at 78 and 84. And then in dead last, we have the Seattle Mariners at 64 and 98. It's going to be hard for the Mariners to produce. They got Mitch Haniger, who's battling an injury right now, and then Kyle Seager. Kyle Seager, also probably the face of the franchise with Mitch Haniger. If you really look at it, their pitching is just not there. Yusei Kikuchi has not lived up to the hype as of yet. Maybe he does it this year. I highly doubt it. And, they just have a lot of young core. Shedlon, like we mentioned, Evan White, top prospect. And J.P. Crawford, will he finally have that opportunity to break free? We just don't know. And we don't think so, to be honest with you. So we have the Mariners at 64 and 98. So, and Oakland is that second wild card spot, by the way. They are the second. Yep. They're my top wild card spot. Are they your top or are they your second? Do you remember?
I believe they're my top because I think I had the Rays at 90 wins as my second one.
Okay, so we both have the Athletics as our number one wild card, so they would host the wild card game. That's our prediction. So, any final thoughts before we move on to our final segment?
I think you've about covered it, so I say in the interest of time, let's get into our final segment. Start one, cut one, bench one.
All right. Save on time, I'm just going to give you yours. You give me your reasons, and then you just give me mine, and I'll give you my reasons. Okay?
Yep, sounds good.
All right, so as we know, we did all these position players, and last week we did recently retired. For me, I decided to give Noah the best utility players from last year. So I think this is really interesting because this is where you really see the mind come into play about how you think these players are. So your first player, you start one, cut one, bench one. You got Marwin Gonzalez for the Twins, Chris Taylor for the Los Angeles Dodgers, and Brock Holt of the Milwaukee Brewers. Start one, cut one, bench one.
All right. As much good as we've talked about Brock Holt these past couple weeks, I think he's probably the guy that I cut. I would say for the start, I'm probably going to go Marwin Gonzalez, and for my bench, I'm going to go Chris Taylor. My initial reaction to why I would go that way is, Marwin Gonzalez and Chris Taylor are both guys that have started for extended times in the major leagues and have proven that they can, sustain their level of production starting every game. Versus Brock Holt, who's kind of been a guy that's always really been more of a bench guy for the Red Sox. It'll be interesting to see if that role changes this year with the Brewers at all, depending on how their infield works out. But, just because of the fact that Marwin and Chris have kind of proved themselves that way, I went with them as my start and bench. I'm going to give the edge to Marwin just because I think he's going to hit with a little bit more pop. And, I think that they both pretty much play the same positions. Marwin, for a time, was penciled into the shortstop for the Twins. Plays the entire infield, can play most of the outfield. Chris Taylor's kind of the same way. Personally, I just, you're pretty much splitting hairs at this point because they're pretty similar players, but I'll take Marwin just because I think he'll probably have a slightly better production as far as the season goes.
Okay. Hey, I like it. I like your thoughts. Okay.
All right. And then for you, I went with the rookies from last season. And so your three players are Pete Alonso, Fernando Tatis Jr., and Yordan Alvarez.
All right, well, this is where the savage part of me comes out. I'm cutting Alvarez. Just because I don't know if they cheated last year. I don't know. He only played in like 80-some ball games. It was towards the end of last year, so I don't know. I will start. Oh, this is tough. I'll start Tatis and bench Alonso. I start Tatis because he is very agile defensively and he can hit. It was unfortunate. It's not a good sample size what to work with from last year because he did battle a season-ending injury. but I believe he had over a 900 OPS in 2019.
Yeah, well over. He was
Well,
close to 1,000.
yeah, so I mean,
For,
it's a small sample size, but we know he's going to be disgusting. We know he's going to be a stud. Um, and then Pete Alonso, you have Pete Alonso. This is a guy who come off the bench. He's going to hit you bombs. He's hit the record, the rookie record for home runs in the season. The dude's an absolute stud, and so he's going to get the job done. It'll be a nice guy to come off the bench. If you need a double switch as well, he can play some good first base. And I really like the polar bear as my bench guy. So those are my reasons. So any closing statements before we end the podcast?
yeah, I mean, I'll just say for what it's worth, I was going to go the same way as you did as far as those rookies went. If you get a chance, for those of you listening, go look at Fernando Tatis's numbers, because he only played in 84 games last year, but like he put up 4.1 WAR and 22 home runs. So if you want to multiply that by 2, technically for a full season, that's 8.2 WAR and 44 home runs as your shortstop.
That's an MVP year.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay. Well, everyone, we'd like to thank you all for tuning in once again, and be sure to follow us on social media at Chalk Talk Nation, at Rob_Rundle, at Noah_Gayhart. Visit our website at www.chalktalknation.com. And hey, like we said, even though baseball hasn't started yet, doesn't mean that we can't go live every Sunday night at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And I know Noah and I are in the works. We're talking about it. We got to get our school figured out and understand what's going on before we really go ahead and commit to this. But we'll probably stream, and we'll be the show. Maybe do a franchise, maybe a road to the show, Diamond Dynasty, what have you. We'll figure it out, but just try and give us some time, because like I said, we got schoolwork coming up. It's online. We're trying to deal with the coronavirus ourselves, trying to prepare. Everyone be safe. Be sure to use hand sanitizer. The social distancing is huge. I want to implement that as well. We'll get through it. It's media bias, as I like to say. I don't think we have anything to worry about, but still it's good to take precaution, because you could hold it and you don't want the elderly to get this. So, but until then, come back next Sunday night, 6 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to have a good podcast. We officially finish our division. So now we're going to talk playoffs, our playoff predictions, our World Series champions, and we'll go from there. So thank you all so much. Once again, we love you all, and we'll see you next week.